This is an audiobook presentation of The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. For the purpose of merging the individual minds into a mastermind which will, for a limited number of days, serve as a stimulus to the individual minds. It may be, and generally is, true that the leaders of these groups do not understand what actually takes place in these meetings, which are usually called pep meetings. The routine of such meetings is usually given over to talks by the leader and other members of the group and occasionally from someone outside of the group. Meanwhile, the minds of the individuals are contacting and recharging one another. The brain of a human being may be compared to an electric battery in that it will become exhausted or run down, causing the owner of it to feel despondent, discouraged, and lacking in pep. Who is so fortunate as never to have had such a feeling? The human brain, when in this depleted condition, must be recharged, and the manner in which this is done is through contact with a more vital mind or minds. The great leaders understand the necessity of this recharging process, and, moreover, they understand how to accomplish this result. This knowledge is the main feature that distinguishes a leader from a follower. Fortunate is the person who understands this principle sufficiently well to keep his or her brain vitalized or recharged by periodically contacting it with a more vital mind. Sexual contact is one of the most effective stimuli through which a mind may be recharged, providing the contact is intelligently made between man and woman who have genuine affection for each other. Any other sort of sexual relationship is a devitalizer of the mind. Any competent practitioner of psychotherapeutics can recharge a brain within a few minutes. Before passing away from the brief reference made to sexual contact as a means of revitalizing a depleted mind, it seems appropriate to call attention to the fact that all of the great leaders, in whatever walks of life they have arisen, have been and are people of highly sexed natures. The word sex is not an indecent word. You'll find it in all the dictionaries. There is a growing tendency on the part of the best-informed physicians and other health practitioners to accept the theory that all diseases begin when the brain of the individual is in a depleted or devitalized state. It is a known fact that a person who has a perfectly vitalized brain is practically, if not entirely, immune from all manner of disease. Every intelligent health practitioner, of whatever school or type, knows that nature or the mind cures the disease in every instance where a cure is effected. Medicines, faith, laying on of hands, chiropractic, osteopathy, and all other forms of outside stimulants are nothing more than artificial aids to nature, or, to state it correctly, mere methods of setting the chemistry of the mind into motion to the end that it readjusts the cells and tissues of the body, revitalizes the brain, and otherwise causes the human machine to function normally. The most orthodox practitioner will admit the truth of this statement. What, then, may be the possibilities for future developments in the field of mind chemistry? Through the principle of a harmonious blending of minds, perfect health may be enjoyed. Through the aid of this same principle, sufficient power may be developed to solve the problem of economic pressure which constantly presses upon every individual. We may judge the future possibilities of mind chemistry by taking inventory of its past achievements, keeping in mind the fact that these achievements have been largely the result of accidental discovery and of chance groupings of minds. We are approaching the time when the professorate of the universities will teach mind chemistry the same as other subjects are now taught. Meanwhile, study and experimentation in connection with this subject open vistas of possibility for the individual student. Mind chemistry and economic power. That mind chemistry may be appropriately applied to the workday affairs of the economic and commercial world is a demonstrable fact. Through the blending of two or more minds, in a spirit of perfect harmony, the principle of mind chemistry may be made to develop sufficient power to enable the individuals whose minds have been thus blended to perform seemingly superhuman feats. Power is the force with which man achieves success in any undertaking. Power, in unlimited quantities, may be enjoyed by any group of men, or men and women, who possess the wisdom with which to submerge their own personalities and their own immediate individual interests, through the blending of their minds in a spirit of perfect harmony. Observe, profitably, the frequency with which the word harmony appears throughout this introduction. There can be no development of a mastermind where this element of perfect harmony does not exist. The individual units of the mind will not blend with the individual units of another mind until the two minds have been aroused and warmed, as it were, with the spirit of perfect harmony of purpose. The moment two minds begin to take divergent roads of interest, the individual units of each mind separate, and the third element, known as a mastermind, which grew out of the friendly or harmonious alliance, will disintegrate. We come, now, to the study of some well-known men who have accumulated great power, also great fortunes, through the application of mind chemistry. Let us begin our study with three men who are known to be men of great achievement in their respective fields of economic, business, and professional endeavor. Their names are Henry Ford, Thomas A. Edison, and Harvey S. Firestone. Of the three, Henry Ford is, by far, the most powerful, having reference to economic and financial power. Mr. Ford is the most powerful man now living on Earth. Many who have studied Mr. Ford believe him to be the most powerful man who ever lived. As far as is known, Mr. Ford is the only man now living, or who ever lived, with sufficient power to outwit the money trust of the United States. Mr. Ford gathers millions of dollars with as great ease as a child fills its bucket with sand when playing on the beach. It has been said by those who were in a position to know, that Mr. Ford, if he needed it, could send out the call for money and gather in $1 billion, $1,000 million, and have it available for use within 1 week. No one who knows of Ford's achievements doubts this. Those who know him well know that he could do it with no more effort than the average man expends in raising the money with which to pay a month's house rent. He could get this money, if he needed it, through the intelligent application of the principles on which this course is based. While Mr. Ford's new automobile was in the process of perfection, in 1927, it is said that he received advance orders, with cash payments, for more than 375,000 cars. At an estimated price of $600 per car, this would amount to $225 million, which he received before a single car was delivered. Such is the power of confidence in Ford's ability. Mr. Edison, as everyone knows, is a philosopher, scientist, and inventor. He is, perhaps, the keenest Bible student on earth, a student of nature's Bible, however, and not of the myriads of man-made Bibles. Mr. Edison has such a keen insight into Mother Nature's Bible that he has harnessed and combined, for the good of mankind, more of nature's laws than any other person now living or who ever lived. It was he who brought together the point of a needle and a piece of revolving wax in such a way that the vibration of the human voice may be recorded and reproduced through the modern talking machine. And it may be Edison who will eventually enable man to pick up and correctly interpret the vibrations of thought which are now recorded in the boundless universe of ether, just as he has enabled man to record and reproduce the spoken word. It was Edison who first harnessed the lightning and made it serve as a light for man's use, through the aid of the incandescent electric light bulb. It was Edison who gave the world the modern moving picture. These are but a few of his outstanding achievements. These modern miracles which he has performed, not by trickery, under the sham pretense of superhuman power, but in the very midst of the bright light of science, transcend all of the so-called miracles described in the man-made books of fiction. Mr. Firestone is the moving spirit in the great Firestone tire industry in Akron, Ohio. His industrial achievements are so well known wherever automobiles are used that no special comment on them seems necessary. All three of these men began their careers, business and professional, without capital and with but little schooling of that type usually referred to as education. All three men are now well educated. All three are wealthy. All three are powerful. Now let us inquire into the source of their wealth and power. Thus far, we have been dealing only with effect. The true philosopher wishes to understand the cause of a given effect. It is a matter of general knowledge that Mr. Ford, Mr. Edison, and Mr. Firestone are close personal friends, and have been so for many years, that in former years they were in the habit of going away to the woods once a year for a period of rest, meditation, and recuperation. But it is not generally known, and it is grave doubt if these three men themselves know it, that there exists between the three men a bond of harmony which has caused their minds to become blended into a master mind, which is the real source of the power of each. This mass mind, growing out of the coordination of the individual minds of Ford, Edison, and Firestone, has enabled these men to tune in on forces and sources of knowledge, with which most men are to no extent familiar. If the student doubts either the principle or the effects described here, let him remember that more than half of the theory here set forth is a known fact. For example, it is known that these three men have great power. It is known that they are wealthy. It is known that they began without capital and with little schooling. It is known that they form periodic mind contacts. It is known that they are harmonious and friendly. It is known that their achievements are so outstanding as to make it impossible to compare these achievements with those of other men in their respective fields of activity. All these effects are known to practically every schoolboy in the civilized world. Therefore there can be no dispute as far as effects are concerned. Of one fact connected with the cause of the achievements of Edison, Ford, and Firestone, we may be sure, namely, that these achievements were in no way based upon trickery, deceit, the supernatural or so-called revelations, or any other form of unnatural law. These men do not possess a stock of legerdemain. They work with natural laws. Laws which, for the most part, are well known to all economists and leaders in the field of science, with the possible exception of the law upon which chemistry of the mind is based. As yet, chemistry of the mind is not sufficiently developed to be classed, by scientific men, in their catalogue of known laws. A mastermind may be created by any group of people who will coordinate their minds in a spirit of perfect harmony. The group may consist of any number from 2 upward. Best results appear available from the blending of 6 or 7 minds. It has been suggested that Jesus Christ discovered how to make use of the principle of mind chemistry and that his seemingly miraculous performances grew out of the power he developed through the blending of the minds of his 12 disciples. It has been pointed out that when one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, broke faith, the mastermind immediately disintegrated, and Jesus met with the supreme catastrophe of his life. When 2 or more people harmonize their minds and produce the effect known as a mastermind, each person in the group becomes vested with the power to contact with and gather knowledge through the subconscious minds of all the other members of the group. This power becomes immediately noticeable, having the effect of stimulating the mind to a higher rate of vibration and otherwise evidencing itself in the form of a more vivid imagination and the consciousness of what appears to be a sixth sense. It is through this sixth sense that new ideas will flash into the mind. These ideas take on the nature and form of the subject dominating the mind of the individual. If the entire group has met for the purpose of discussing a given subject, ideas concerning that subject will come pouring into the minds of all present, as if an outside influence were dictating them. The minds of those participating in the mastermind become magnets, attracting ideas and thought stimuli of the most highly organized and practical nature from no one knows where. The process of mind blending here described as a mastermind may be likened to the act of one who connects many electric batteries to a single transmission wire, thereby stepping up the power flowing over that line. Each battery added increases the power passing over that line by the amount of energy the battery carries. Just so in the case of blending individual minds into a mastermind. Each mind, through the principle of mind chemistry, stimulates all the other minds in the group, until the mind energy thus becomes so great that it penetrates to and connects with the universal energy known as ether, which, in turn, touches every atom of the entire universe. The modern radio apparatus substantiates, to a considerable extent, the theory here expounded. Powerful sending or broadcasting stations must be erected through which the vibration of sound is stepped up before it can be picked up by the much higher vibrating energy of the ether and carried in all directions. A mastermind made up of many individual minds, so blended that they produce strong vibrating energy, constitutes almost an exact counterpart of the radio broadcasting station. Every public speaker has felt the influence of mind chemistry, for it is a well-known fact that as soon as the individual minds of an audience become en rapport, attuned to the rate of vibration of the mind of the speaker, with the speaker, there is a noticeable increase of enthusiasm in the speaker's mind, and he often rises to heights of oratory which surprise all, including himself. The first 5 to 10 minutes of the average speech are devoted to what is known as warming up. This is meant the process through which the minds of the speaker and his audience are becoming blended in a spirit of perfect harmony. Every speaker knows what happens when this state of perfect harmony fails to materialize on the part of his audience. The seemingly supernatural phenomena occurring in spiritualistic meetings are the result of the reaction, of one another, of the minds in the group. These phenomena seldom begin to manifest themselves under 10 to 20 minutes after the group is formed, for the reason that this is about the time required for the minds in the group to become harmonized or blended. The messages received by members of a spiritualistic group probably come from one of 2 sources, or from both, namely, first, from the vast storehouse of the subconscious mind of some member of the group, or second, from the universal storehouse of the ether, in which, it is more than probable, all thought vibration is preserved. Neither any known natural law nor human reason supports the theory of communication with individuals who have died. It is a known fact that any individual may explore the store of knowledge in another's mind, through this principle of mind chemistry, and it seems reasonable to suppose that this power may be extended to include contact with whatever vibrations are available in the ether, if there are any. The theory that all the higher and more refined vibrations, such as those growing out of thought, are preserved in the ether grows out of the known fact that neither matter nor energy, the two known elements of the universe, may be either created or destroyed. It is reasonable to suppose that all vibrations which have been stepped up sufficiently to be picked up and absorbed in the ether, will go on forever. The lower vibrations, which do not blend with or otherwise contact the ether, probably live a natural life and die out. All the so-called geniuses probably gained their reputations because, by mere chance or otherwise, they formed alliances with other minds, which enabled them to step up their own mental vibrations to where they were enabled to contact the vast temple of knowledge recorded and filed in the ether of the universe. All of the great geniuses, as far as this author has been enabled to gather the facts, were highly sexed people. The fact that sexual contact is the greatest known mind stimulant lends color to the theory herein described. Inquiring further into the source of economic power, as manifested by the achievements of men in the field of business, let us study the case of the Chicago group known as the Big Six, consisting of William Wrigley Jr., who owns the chewing gum business bearing his name, and whose individual income is said to be more than $15 million a year, John R. Thompson, who operates the chain of lunchrooms bearing his name, Mr. Losker, who owns the Lord and Thomas Advertising Agency, Mr. McCulloch, who owns the Parmalee Express Company, the largest transfer business in America, and Mr. Ritchie and Mr. Hertz, who own the yellow taxicab business. A reliable financial reporting company has estimated the yearly income of these six men at upwards of $25 million, or an average of more than $4 million a year per man. Analysis of the entire group of six men discloses the fact that not one of them had any special educational advantages, that all began without capital or extensive credit, that their financial achievement has been due to their own individual plans, and not to any fortunate turn of the wheel of chance. Many years ago, these six men formed a friendly alliance, meeting at stated periods for the purpose of assisting one another with ideas and suggestions in their various and sundry lines of business endeavor. With the exception of Hertz and Ritchie, none of the six men were in any manner associated with a legal partnership. These meetings were strictly for the purpose of cooperating on the give-and-take basis of assisting one another with ideas and suggestions, and occasionally by endorsing notes and other securities to assist some member of the group who had met with an emergency making such help necessary. It is said that each of the individuals belonging to this Big Six group is a millionaire many times over. As a rule, there is nothing worthy of special comment on behalf of a man who does nothing more than accumulate a few $1,000,000. However, there is something connected with the financial success of this particular group of men that is well worth comment, study, analysis and even emulation, and that something is the fact that they have learned how to coordinate their individual minds by blending them in a spirit of perfect harmony, thereby creating a master mind that unlocks, to each individual of the group, doors which are closed to most of the human race. The United States Steel Corporation is one of the strongest and most powerful industrial organizations in the world. The idea out of which this great industrial giant grew was born in the mind of Albert H. Gary, a more or less commonplace small-town lawyer who was born and reared in a small Illinois town near Chicago. Mr. Gary surrounded himself with a group of men whose minds he successfully blended in a spirit of perfect harmony, thereby creating the mastermind, which is the moving spirit of the great United States Steel Corporation. Search where you will, wherever you find outstanding success in business, finance, industry or any of the professions, you may be sure that back of the success is some individual who has applied the principle of mind chemistry, out of which a mastermind has been created. These outstanding successes often appear to be the handiwork of but one person, but search closely, and the other individuals whose minds have been coordinated with his own may be found. Remember that two or more persons may operate the principle of mind chemistry so as to create a mastermind. Power, manpower, is organized knowledge expressed through intelligent efforts. No effort can be said to be organized unless the individuals engaged in the effort coordinate their knowledge and energy in a spirit of perfect harmony. The lack of such harmonious coordination of effort is the main cause of practically every business failure. An interesting experiment was conducted by this author in collaboration with the students of a well-known college. Each student was requested to write an essay on how and why Henry Ford became wealthy. Each student was required to describe, as a part of his or her essay, what was believed to be the nature of Ford's real assets, of what these assets consisted in detail. The majority of the students gathered financial statements and inventories of Ford assets and used these as the basis of their estimates of Ford's wealth. Included in these sources of Ford's wealth were such as cash and banks, raw and finished materials and stock, real estate and buildings, and goodwill, estimated at from 10 to 25% of the value of the material assets. One student out of the entire group of several hundred answered as follows: Henry Ford's assets consist, in the main, of two items. First, working capital and raw and finished materials. Second, the knowledge, gained from the experience of Henry Ford himself, and the cooperation of a well-trained organization that understands how to apply this knowledge to the best advantage from the Ford viewpoint. It is impossible to estimate, with anything approximating correctness, the actual dollars and cents value of either of these two groups of assets, but it is my opinion that their relative values are: the organized knowledge of the Ford organization 75%. The value of cash and physical assets of every nature, including raw and finished materials, is 25%. This author is of the opinion that this statement was not compiled by the young man whose name was signed to it, without the assistance of some very analytical and experienced mind or minds. Unquestionably, the biggest asset that Henry Ford had was his own brain. Next to this would come the brains of his immediate circle of associates, for it has been through coordination of these that the physical assets that he controls were accumulated. Destroy every plant the Ford Motor Company owns, every piece of machinery, every atom of raw or finished material, every finished automobile, and every dollar on deposit in any bank, and Ford would still be the most powerful man, economically, on earth. The brains which have built the Ford business could duplicate it again in short order. Capital is always available, in unlimited quantities, to such brains as Ford's. Ford is the most powerful man on earth, economically, because he has the keenest and most practical conception of the principle of organized knowledge of any man on earth, as far as this author has the means of knowing. Despite Ford's great power and financial success, it may be that he has blundered often in the application of the principles through which he accumulated this power. There is but little doubt that Ford's methods of mind coordination have often been crude. They must need have been in the earlier days of this experience, before he gained the wisdom of application that would naturally go with the maturity of years. Neither can there be much doubt that Ford's application of the principle of mind chemistry was, at least at the start, the result of a chance alliance with other minds, particularly the mind of Edison. It is more than probable that Mr. Ford's remarkable insight into the laws of nature was first begun as the result of his friendly alliance with his own wife long before he ever met either Mr. Edison or Mr. Firestone. Many a man who never knows the real source of his success is made by his wife, through the application of the mastermind principle. Mrs. Ford is a most remarkably intelligent woman, and this author has reason to believe that it was her mind, blended with Mr. Ford's, which gave him his first real start toward power. It may be mentioned, without in any way depriving Ford of any honor or glory, that in his earlier days of experience, he had to combat the powerful enemies of illiteracy and ignorance to a greater extent than did either Edison or Firestone, both of whom were gifted by natural heredity with a most fortunate aptitude for acquiring and applying knowledge. Ford had to hew this talent out of the rough, raw timbers of his hereditary estate. Within an inconceivably short period of time, Ford has mastered three of the most stubborn enemies of mankind and transformed them into assets constituting the very foundation of his success. These enemies are ignorance, illiteracy, and poverty. Any man who can stay the hand of these three savage forces, much less harness and use them to good account, is well worth close study by the less fortunate individuals. This is an age of industrial power in which we are living. The source of all this power is organized effort. Not only has the management of industrial enterprises efficiently organized individual workers, but in many instances, mergers of the industry have been effected in such a manner and to the end that these combinations, as in the case of the United States Steel Corporation, for example, have accumulated practically unlimited power. One may hardly glance at the news of a day's events without seeing a report of some business, industrial or financial merger, bringing under one enormous management resources, and thus creating great power. One day it is a group of banks, another day, it is a chain of railroads, the next day, it is a combination of steel plants, all merging for the purpose of developing power through highly organized and coordinated effort. Knowledge, general in nature and unorganized, is not power, it is only potential power, the material out of which real power may be developed. Any modern library contains an unorganized record of all the knowledge of value to which the present stage of civilization is heir. But this knowledge is not power, because it is not organized. Every form of energy and every species of animal or plant life to survive must be organized. The oversized animals whose bones have filled nature's boneyard through extinction have left mute but certain evidence that non-organization means annihilation. From the electron, the smallest particle of matter, to the largest star in the universe, these and every material thing in between these two extremes offer proof positive that one of nature's first laws is that of organization. Fortunate is the individual who recognizes the importance of this law and makes it his business to familiarize himself with the various ways in which the law may be applied to advantage. The astute businessman has not only recognized the importance of the law of organized effort, but he has made this law the warp and the woof of his power. Without any knowledge whatsoever of the principle of mind chemistry, or that such a principle exists, many men have accumulated great power by merely organizing the knowledge they possessed. The majority of all who have discovered the principle of mind chemistry and developed that principle into a mastermind have stumbled upon this knowledge by the merest of an accident, often failing to recognize the real nature of their discovery or to understand the source of their power. This author is of the opinion that all living persons who at the present time are consciously making use of the principle of mind chemistry and developing power through the blending of minds, may be counted on the fingers of the two hands, with, perhaps, several fingers left to spare. If this estimate is even approximately true, the student will readily see that there is but the slight danger of the field of mind chemistry practice becoming overcrowded. It is a well-known fact that one of the most difficult tasks that any businessman must perform is that of inducing those who are associated with him to coordinate their efforts in a spirit of harmony. To induce continuous cooperation between a group of workers in any undertaking is next to impossible. Only the most efficient leaders can accomplish this highly desired object, but once in a great while, such a leader will rise above the horizon in the field of industry, business, or finance, and then the world hears of Henry Ford, Thomas A. Edison, John D. Rockefeller, Sr., E. H. Harriman, or James J. Hill. Power and success are practically synonymous terms. One grows out of the other, therefore, any person who has the knowledge and the ability to develop power, through the principle of harmonious coordination of effort between individual minds, or in any other manner, may be successful in any reasonable undertaking that is possible of successful termination. It must not be assumed that a mastermind will immediately spring, mushroom fashion, out of every group of minds which make a pretense of coordination in a spirit of harmony. Harmony, in the real sense of the meaning of the word, is as rare among groups of people as genuine Christianity among those who proclaim themselves Christians. Harmony is the nucleus around which the state of mind known as the mastermind must be developed. Without this element of harmony, there can be no mastermind, a truth that cannot be repeated too often. Woodrow Wilson had in mind the development of a mastermind, to be composed of groups of minds representing the civilized nations of the world, in his proposal for establishing the League of Nations. Wilson's conception was the most far-reaching humanitarian idea ever created in the mind of man, because it dealt with a principle that embraces sufficient power to establish a real brotherhood of man on earth. The League of Nations, or some similar blending of international minds, in a spirit of harmony, is sure to become a reality. The time when such unity of minds will take place will be measured largely by the time required for the great universities and non-sectarian institutions of learning to supplant ignorance and superstition with understanding and wisdom. This time is rapidly approaching. Napoleon Hill was an American author in the area of the New Thought movement who was one of the earliest producers of the modern genre of personal success literature. He is widely considered to be one of the great writers on success. His most famous work, The Law of Success, is one of the best-selling books of all time. Hill's works examine the power of personal beliefs and the role they play in personal success. What the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve is one of Hill's hallmark expressions. How achievement actually occurs, and a formula for it that puts success in reach of the average person were the focal points of Hill's books. Reading the book can benefit anyone seeking personal development and ways to succeed in different areas of their lives.